So first off, if anybody's ever been to any of my programs before, I always have some sort of saying or some sort of quotation or quote that somebody has come up with that relates to what we're going to talk about today. So in doing my research, I found an African proverb which states that the child who is not embraced by the village will essentially burn it down to feel its warmth. Okay, so obviously this has many connotations, but as it relates to today, if our clients who are struggling with these issues did not get what they needed from their family system, and that means their parents, their caregivers, or even people that they have close relationships with, then people will act out to try to get something from these people. Ironically, if you think about or buy into the idea of a God shot, which I utilize when I'm talking with people a lot, of things happening at certain times that don't seem to be coincidental, or maybe it is coincidental if you don't think of God shots. My client that I had this morning before I came on to do the presentation, I've been working with her on and off for many years, and her mother and her father are both individuals who would fit the criteria for rejection, abandonment, abuse, really. And the client is 43 years old or 45, somewhere in there. So she's older. And she came in today because her mother has yet again rejected her. In the form of, I'm not going to support you anymore, don't talk to me anymore, I don't want to hear from you, all that kind of stuff. So we talked today about the idea that, over the last 40 years, basically, she has been trying everything to get her parents' approval, specifically her mother. And no matter what she does, it doesn't matter if she goes and visits her, it doesn't matter if she's there for her doctor's appointments, it doesn't matter if she calls her every day, it doesn't matter. She's not going to ever get what it is that she needs from her parent, but yet she will burn the village down to try to get it. Because, as I say many times, people that are in these situations like to go to Home Depot and ask for butter. And when Home Depot says we don't carry butter, they change what they're wearing, how they're asking, what time they go, whatever it is, the amount of money they're offering. So that's something that is an analogy that I use all the time with clients about, you're going to Home Depot and asking for butter. You're never going to get butter at Home Depot. It doesn't matter what you do, you will never get it there. And so for parents that we're talking about today, it's the same thing. They're Home Depot and their kid is asking for butter, and it's not ever going to happen. They're never going to get it from that source. They will from other sources, but not that. So let's jump right in and look at the inner child and kind of get an idea of what it is that the inner child is and where it started from and all of those good things. So what's the inner child? So the inner child was initially, Jung is really the person that initially came up or originated the idea of this inner child. And in his descriptions of the archetypes that he would talk about, he believed that our inner child drives many of the emotions in our daily life, especially when we're unaware of it, which most people are. When you lose conscious awareness of your inner child, you lose conscious awareness of a part of yourself. That was his thought process. So as I mentioned, the emotional and psychological part of a person's childhood self that stays with us into adulthood is what is referred to as the inner child, and the vulnerable and neglected aspects of a person's past. So when I'm talking with people, and I talk a lot with people about their inner child and doing inner child work and those kind of things, that I kind of come up with the idea for them of, you've got these two parts of you. You've got the adult, cognitive, I can go to my job, I can, handle the day-to-day tasks of life. But when it comes to emotional stuff, they probably do respond in a way that is very childlike emotionally. That's your inner child. The inner child likes to come up and run the show when it comes to emotional things. And that's because the inner child was not cared for when she actually was a child. And so what we need to do, obviously, is heal the inner child and deal with some of the things that happened in childhood with our clients. And that's a process, obviously, and one of the reasons why we're doing the webinar today. So that's the originator of the inner child. But there's a long history of the wounded inner child concept. In the psychodynamic theory, Freud actually emphasized the significance of early childhood experiences in shaping adult personality. And his psychodynamic theory suggested that unresolved conflicts and experiences from childhood could influence emotional well-being in later life. So even that far back with Freud, we've been sort of thinking about the idea of this inner child, maybe not identified as such, but certainly the concept was there. And then, of course, attachment theory. And we're going to talk about attachment theory today, but as we know, it was developed by John Bowlby, and then later it was extended by Mary Ainsworth. But the idea highlights the importance of the early caregiver child relationship in forming attachment patterns. And so insecure attachment styles could contribute to difficulty with relationships and also some emotional regulation issues later in life. The theory of transactional analysis, excuse me, Eric Berne introduced this concept of the, quote, parent, adult, and child ego states. The inner child then represents the emotional and experiential aspects of childhood that continue to influence adult behavior and emotions. Jungian, which we talked about, explored the idea of a personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, and he emphasized the importance of exploring and integrating aspects of the unconscious, including childhood experiences. And then finally, John Bradshaw, which is a sort of more modern in that it was in the 1980s. But he emphasized the importance of healing childhood wounds for emotional well-being. So this is a long, well-researched area in terms of what happens in childhood that affects the ability of people to have functional relationships, manage their emotional regulation, and essentially take care of themselves. So we know this, right? Everybody who's a clinician knows that the idea of a dysfunctional family history probably does affect relationships later on. And so keeping that in mind for the idea of rejection, that's still the case, right? It doesn't just have to be what we consider to be horrible abuse. There can rejection, neglect, those kind of things also heavily influence what happens to a person later on in their life.